The way that this session is going to be done, because it does have some science involved, is I'm going to start out with about a 12-minute presentation on the topic of hyperthermia. I'm going to ask some questions to the panel that are ones that they don't know what they are, and both of them have asked me, what are you going to ask me, what are you going to ask me? And then I'll open it up to you folks, because this is an area where there's an astounding lack of research. And there's all kinds of attitudes about the topic of hyperthermia, and I can tell you most of it is exactly that. It's attitudes. There's not a lot of science here. So that's kind of how we're going to run this. The key to success in open water, regardless of what type of situation is exactly these two topics, is flexibility and adaptability. You as an athlete, you as a coach, you as a meet organizer, these are things that you have to have as characteristics. This is not a pool that's controlled by the county that has this amount of chlorine and this amount of bromine and this amount of electrolytes and has all those things all balanced. This is a living organism. This is a living organism. It is the body of water. So you have to be flexible and you have to be adaptable to pull this off as a team organizer. You can start out with a day like this, like we did in Melbourne, which was just flat out beautiful, to the point where I took my camera out and said, I got to get a picture of this. I mean, how beautiful can a day be? I mean, how flat can water be? I mean, that's it. An hour and a half later, this is that same body of water. Race was called after the police boat flipped upside down and the rescue teams had to be evacuated. And then we decided it'd be a good idea to get the athletes. So, everything came out very well. Then the decision was, now what do you do? It's a 25K, it's a world championship event. And the answer was very simple by the organizers is, well, we'll just swim again tomorrow. They were 15K into it. The athletes did have something to say about that, not wanting to do it a second time. So what they ended up doing is starting in the same position they were at the time of that and then conducting the rest of the race the next day. But living organism, this body of water, and you have to respect it. It can change on a nickel. Energy exchange principles are the same whether you're talking about hot or you're talking about cold. This is a pretty simple example where you're talking about evaporation, which is basically a conversion of liquid to gas, which is sweating, and then convection, which is the movement of water across a body. See, I missed one slide just then. The other two are radiation, which of course is sunshine, and conduction, which if you're sitting in hot water, cold water, any water, there's a transfer of energy back and forth between the bodies. Either it's heating you or you're heating it. Bring out a point to this that sounds pretty simple. When you get a hot tub, do you make the water move? And if you do, why is that? Because it feels hotter. Hello? That's convection. Some pretty easy examples for you to remember. Hyperthermia, there's lots of different forms of hyperthermia, from something basically as simple as your rings are tight on your hand, which is called heat edema, to heat syncope, whereby you get a little dizziness, usually going from sitting to standing or that sort of thing, usually occurring in athletes that are not used to the warmth. Easy, simple treatments, basically hydration, unless they have other medications or things on board, laying the athlete down, letting them equalize their pressures, and then they just stand up. Cool fluids are important. Remember, not iced fluids that can actually work against you. But pretty simple principles and easy basic treatment. Heat cramping, you start getting into some interference with muscle firing. If you're on a boat, if you're working with an athlete, you very frequently will see the athlete change in the way their stroke production goes and how they move through the water. You as a coach can say, well, that stroke looks different for my athlete, and that's time to think about this. Basic treatment, you got to rehydrate them. Pay attention to electrolytes. Their chances are they're getting low. Massage is helpful here. Consider sodium levels, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. This is an electrolyte which can get you in a lot of trouble. How did we do that? Well, at least we went backwards that time, forward. Heat exhaustion, exactly what it says. It's an overwhelming feel of fatigue, weakness, decreasing coordination. Now here's a term I want you to really focus on, mild confusion. This is the first time I've mentioned anything about the central nervous system. Once the central nervous system starts being involved, whether you're talking about a cold athlete or a warm athlete, it's time to be aware that you could be getting in trouble. Because when that starts going, things can regress on you very quickly. So anytime there's some confusion, some agitation, certainly anything involving the GI tract like this, you've got to be worried. This is when you start looking at checking core temperatures. This is for those of us that are centigrade impaired, as you can start looking at temperatures that these athletes may be having as core, and a lot of different things that you can do for them from oral rehydration. But again, you need to get these people out into an emergency setting. So once the central nervous system starts being involved in the symptom complex that you're seeing, it's time to get out. Don't play with that. Okay? Very simple point. Got to get that one down. Because the next step is this. Heat strokes can occur from lots of different conditions. Your athlete does not have to be sweating. Of course, in the water, we wouldn't necessarily detect that anyway. There's dry, there's wet. But again, central nervous system symptoms, hallucinations, coma, seizures, time to get out, guys. If that's your athlete, you did not manage them well. But there's no point in doing anything much temporarily there except getting them out of the warm situation and getting them to places that can deliver care. You've waited too long. Okay, so what event sites should we look at as being ones that we'd suspect our athletes to be getting into situations where there's too much warm water? And the obvious one is hot places. Doesn't necessarily be that way. For instance, on the West Coast, as you guys know, you can have very cool water and very warm air. On the East Coast, we have something called the Gulf Stream. So when the land heats up, Gulf Stream swings inside, and the water can bounce up by as much as 5 to 10 degrees centigrade in literally 48 hours. Because it's a different body of water that's responding to the land. So that's a situation where you need to know the types of currents that are in your area and how it may affect your swim literally overnight. The East Coast is a great example of that. So hot places is where you'd likely get in trouble. Here's another one though. First lecture on hyperthermia I think that was given, I gave to the FINA Sports Medicine Congress in Manchester. It was done before the Beijing Games. Because we had a closed body of water. And that's where heat is likely to build up. This is Montreal. We took the US team into Lake Placid to train them in cold water because it was Canada and everything in Canada had to be cold. I was the first one to get in to do a warming swim. I just turned around to the coach and said, we did the wrong thing. I mean, it was warm. This is a rowing basin. They closed off the St. Lawrence River to make it a flat body of water, and it collected heat for the rest of the week. To the point where on the last day, for the day of the 25K, we had fish that were floating on the surface dead. It was so warm. That's a little warm. But going into Beijing, of course, what did we have? We had a rowing basin, 3 meters deep, bright sunshine, hot days, high humidity. Luckily, on the day of the 10K race, it became overcast and had a misting rain and saved the whole thing. But this was a setup for disaster, as you can imagine. So we started getting concerned about that topic, which really had not been seen much in open water swimming. Now, this is another topic that goes along with it. It doesn't happen hypothermia. It tends to happen only when your athlete is too warm. It's when their sodium levels drop too low, they can get into some confusion, loss of coordination. It's basically a form of water intoxication where you have to mix your athlete's solutions correctly to have this work. But these people have got to get out too. Again, the common thread of central nervous system is involved. As soon as that confusion hits in, get out of there. So, we have a challenging situation. It's great and rewarding, but it can be dangerous for us in these hot, warm conditions. And I think Master Swimming is doing some incredible stuff to kind of get this ball rolling and get these questions going. I have a few questions for panelists, and then I'll go ahead and open it up to you guys. I'm going to give you about 20 minutes to ask questions of this group, because this is such a hot topic per se, and that pun is intended. And the first question I'm actually going to throw at Liz. Let me have you guys introduce yourselves first before I throw this out.
I'm Liz Tucker, and I am the Race Director Certification Manager at USA Triathlon. So I manage all of our education programs for event directors.
Hi, Ralph Goto. I'm the Director of Lifeguard Services for the City and County of Honolulu.
Now, Ralph informed me that he has an unusual situation in the fact that they live in heaven, paradise, and they don't have hot or cold water. It's always perfect there. That's a direct quote. That's a direct quote. Okay, first question I have actually for Liz. USA Triathlon has had to address some topics about hyperthermia because they have wetsuit divisions and non-wetsuit divisions and all these other things. So I'm interested in how USA Triathlon has dealt with the topic of hyperthermia and how they selected the specific degrees, which she'll go into, as to here you can wear a wetsuit, and here you can't, and here you can wear it, but you won't be recognized, and all those other types of qualifications.
So like Jim said, we have some rules in place. What we actually don't have in place are water temperature rules in terms of high temperatures and low temperatures when races can be held. Instead, what we have in place are rules around when you can and cannot wear wetsuits. So those rules, and we're talking about amateur athletes, not our elite athletes here, are if the water temperature is 78 degrees or below, wetsuits are legal in any race. If the water temperature is between 78 degrees and 84 degrees, athletes can wear the wetsuits, but they're not eligible for awards. So essentially at that point, they're not using it for warmth of any kind, it's simply flotation, and so they wouldn't be eligible to be ranked with the other athletes. And then above 84 degrees water temperature, wetsuits are not allowed under any circumstances. So we based those temperatures on a study that was done by Ball State University that studied the effects of different water temperatures on athletes. And actually that study was looking more at hypothermia